Good afternoon and welcome to another OSR Tabletop live stream with GM Bluddworth. Um, Once again, a very rare occasion that I'm recording from work. It just so happens that I was having some difficulty uploading from home last evening. I had a video in the queue. It is still, believe it or not, updating some 12 hours later. So I don't know what's going on with that. So I wanted to make sure that I came on and and talk a little bit about something going on within the hobby or just what I'm doing, on my own channel or with my own gaming group. And I decided to, while I'm waiting for that video to actually queue up, I've decided to talk a little bit about this topic of today. So I do not often speak about Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition, or what WOTC is doing, Wizards of the Coast is doing with their IP and their new products and everything. But this recent announcement of what they're doing with Starjammer, which I really couldn't care less. Spelljammer, I should say, which I really couldn't care less about. I never played it. Never, I wasn't a second edition at that time frame, a second edition player or DM. So, and that I don't see as much of an issue with. But however, Dragonlance, I was actually a very big fan of Dragonlance, and so when I see that they're doing things with the IP that, even though I understand that they own it and they don't need to get permission from Tracy Hickman or Margaret Weiss as to what they do with the property, it still it still strikes me as being a kind of a crappy thing to do, not to even consult them when they had the opportunity. It wouldn't have harmed them in any way to say, hey, we did reach out to the creators of Dragonlance and we spoke to them. And same thing with Jeff Grubb with Spelljammer as well. So it's just another example of Wizards of the Coast kind of thumbing its nose at the legacy of the game, at the former creators and artists or authors of and player base of Dungeons and Dragons. So to leave it the way that they did, and to lean forward with without at least consulting or talking or even inviting, hey, come on this live stream and talk a little bit about, just have a conversation with them. It wouldn't have harmed them in any way to do that. If anything, it would have probably shown some goodwill. So that's a few things that came to my mind to talk about a little bit here. And I'm going to start doing a kind of a breakdown of some of the questions and the comments that I want to talk about as far as the direction of 5e. Like I said, I don't normally spend any time on my channel talking about that. My channel is almost strictly an old school role playing channel. So I focus mostly on AD&D First Edition, old school Dungeons and Dragons, or OSR games of today. So let me just send a couple shout outs. So hey Cal, how's it going? Thanks for popping in. I know this is a kind of a weird time. I usually don't do this from work. I'm on my lunch hour, so I figured let me get something out there until I figure out what's going on at home with my computer. It's probably my modem. It's Time Warner Spectrum is probably one of the worst cable services I can think of. Maybe we will get to not speaking of them. Yeah, I mean, eventually, I think that's going to the original question, and I will pop that up there. So I'm thinking of going along that line too, of basically just saying, I really don't care what Wizards of the Coast is doing as far as their direction of the game, because to me, it's not really the same game that I grew up playing, and I consider it to be vastly a good distance away from what Dungeons and Dragons really is. Good afternoon, Derek. Thanks for popping in. And Cal, yeah, you're on a break. I'm on a break as well. So let me get to my little things here. So I asked the question: how far removed from the legacy and essence of D&D can Wizards of the Coast take 5e before we should pay it no mind? I think I'm pretty much there. This is probably my last video that that I will spend any time with talking about the direction of Wizards of the Coast, unless they make a dramatic change down the road. But I don't anticipate that happening. So it's at this point, I really don't consider it part of, I don't consider them doing anything but moving the logo forward. But as far as the game or the legacy of any of the, original, creators, Gary Gygax or Dave Arneson, I honestly believe that the creative staff of Wizards of the Coast most likely goes months, if not years, without ever uttering any of their names. Without ever acknowledging or uttering Gary Gygax or Dave Arneson or any of the, including the individuals who are still alive today. So I doubt that they bring up Tim Kask or Frank Metzner or any of the other individuals that were from second edition and previous. So excuse me. So that's the first thing. Now, for me, when I look at the trajectory, because back in 2015, I bought the core 3 books of 5th edition, and I even played it a few times, never ran it, but I played it a few times. And the game mechanics, I had mostly issues with the game mechanics, as far as it being very easy. And, most of the DMs that I had at the time were highly modifying, homebrewing the game system to make it a little bit more challenging, at least, eliminating death saves and short rests and those. And when I saw that keep on going on and on and on, I started saying, well, then why don't we just play a D&D first edition then? It seems like this game is not giving you what you're looking for, so why use it instead of using something that was already tried and true? So I certainly didn't buy anything after 2015, early 2016. I forget exactly when I got all 3 books, but it was around that, that first Christmas time. And I pretty much left it there, played it a couple of times, like I said, and never touched it. Beginning with Tasha's, I think Tasha's is really what started to introduce these systematic stripping down of what the essence of Dungeons and Dragons mechanics were. All right, this is when they started swapping out racial abilities and modifiers and traits. Racial level limits and for classes were starting to get removed. They started going back and forth or becoming wishy-washy on an alignment system, which was really integral to keeping that, that challenge between good and evil taking place. And so they started to implement these changes as they went with each successive supplement or, whether it's supplemental book or adventure book, and they started mixing up, is it like a survival guide? Is it an adventure booklet? Is it a source book? Is it a combination of all 3? They started to just wrap everything up into one thing so that, I don't know if that was a marketing ploy that was like, well, if we want to get you to buy these adventures, we're going to tie some character, new character types and such into each one of these books to make it a little bit more enticing, because maybe the market for adventure modules just wasn't there for for them, so they started doing these combo books, which I certainly wouldn't be a big fan of either. So Let's take a look at comments here. Yeah, so already there, the core books. Yeah, just the core books is all that I find. I mean, the only product that I really found to be kind of useful was the Essentials box kit. The Essentials box. That I found useful. But after that, and I saw the flaws in that was that it generated that gameplay of just 6 sessions, and I can see, and I'll talk about that a little bit later too. And that's another part of that watering down of the essence of Dungeons and Dragons that I will get to. Another problem that I had with 5e that I think is a big departure, even though some people might not pick up on that, is that the challenge ratings. To mitigate the risk and an abundance of actions and features and advantages to further reduce risk on top of that, the one aspect of playing old school D&D was that you as a player, you had to do your own risk assessment. There were times that you were going to have an encounter that you could not possibly beat if you tried to face it head on. And so it helped you develop a fight or flight response to those things. And you had to be fairly quick. And this wasn't an adversarial DM thing. This was the fact that the world is a dangerous place, and it's not cordoned off for level ranges. So you can wander into a part of the forest that has an ancient green dragon that is going to wipe you all out if you're not careful, or you could be a very powerful character. You could be a fighter lord with a whole group of 9+ level characters, and you come upon an orc encampment where the highest level thing that you're going to face there has 3 hit die, and you'll be able to steamroll through them. All right, and that's just the randomness of a living world that you can encounter. You can encounter something that you can't handle and you better run, or you can encounter something that you can just steamroll over, or make other choices rather than just steamrolling them over. You can capture them. You can do various other things as well. So the old style of play really lent itself to more role playing and more working off the character sheet rather than being tied to the character sheet. It had more exploration because now you had to be a lot more cautious about how you were traveling around. It was just a much more immersive and dangerous activity to be an adventurer, and I think that has really been lost. Both in the game mechanics, but also in the culture that Wizards of the Coast has nurtured and encouraged. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well a bit later. As a primarily Paladin player, they haven't really given that class much since the Player's Handbook. Oath of Vengeance is still the best subclass. And that's one of the problems I have with 5th edition as well. Good afternoon, Rational Ginger, and Derek. If I haven't said hello to Derek, I believe I did. But too many subclasses, just too many different layers of the game, and to me, that also waters down one of the essentials of old school Dungeons and Dragons, and that was that when you created a character, you were making meaningful choices. You were making a meaningful choice when you picked your class. And if you're going really old school, you rolled your attributes first to see what class you might qualify for. And DMs, occasionally at least, would say, no, you can only play what you're qualified to roll. Now, if you missed by 1 or 2 points on a particular attribute, Then you would look at the race to see, well, which race is going to give me that attribute so I can play the class that I was hoping to do. All right, but you're still going to be the minimum level or attribute for that particular class. Again, a meaningful choice. Even in certain editions, it's like first edition AD&D, gender was a meaningful choice sometimes. If you had a fighter that was, an 18 strength, you're going to take a male, and you could potentially have an 18-100. But if you take a female, you might only have an 18-75, well, going off the top of my head, as a maximum. And that's if she was a human, or it could be something slightly less than that. But anyway, the point is that you're still making a meaningful choice, and that is going to potentially impact the way that you role play. It's going to, it's just going to make you think more about your character off the sheet than on the sheet. And that's the key that I think the essence of the game that's being lost by having all of this flexibility. So let me get back to some of our, so we talked about challenge ratings and those various features and actions and such. So when you have multiple actions and multiple features that you can keep on relying upon when your initial action wasn't successful, again, it makes the game too easy. It slides it way towards the player character side, and you lose the heroic fantasy aspect of it. You can have the fantasy aspect of it, but you really can't be heroic if there's no risk, or the risk is so minimal that the chances of failure is next to nothing. And that's a perfect segue to get into one of these others comments I'm going to make here. So the creation source adventure books and modules that eliminate the possibility of failure. So Strixhaven is a perfect example of that, where in Strixhaven, and I've watched many videos of people praising Strixhaven and for the things that they did. And in one video, the commentator was talking about it and talking about, well, if you failed the test, you can cheat and get the correct answer. Even if you cheated, there's a spell that you can use that will automatically make you successful. They're kept on being another possibility of getting to a passing in order to get through this. And this was, a school setting where there was no real, combat involved here. And you're going from level 1 to 10, I believe, in Strixhaven, and never once really being challenged by anything, and having no chance of failure. And then you have all of these other supports if you're befriending others to gain their attributes and traits and bonuses and buffs and everything as well. It just becomes continuously watered down. Then we get to the newest, or soon to be released, the Radiant Citadel, where they removed all conflict of any kind from it. So again, how is this the essence of Dungeons and Dragons? How is this a heroic fantasy if there's no conflict? There's no way to actually be challenged. There's no way to fail. There's no way to even have a character killed in these instances. And it's just it's becoming more of a, it's story time. We're just telling a story, about these characters, and they're just yucking it up in a social interaction, and that's it. There's no real adventure taking place with these. Each successive book is adding less and less conflict, less and less challenge, and less Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, 1850. I don't know if it's 1850. I don't have it in front of me, so I'd like to check. I think it's higher than 1850, but Not really sure either. Participation prizes were all strong and brave. Yes, I mean, and it's not even the you're. I don't know what you're participating in. You're participating in having a chat around the coffee table is about as challenging as what they're presenting as an adventure. D&D the bland. Yes, it is. It's very bland, and even its artwork, and I know a lot of other people point this out as well. Even when they use vibrant colors, they kind of mute them a little bit on top of that, so it just everything just appears to be soulless and lifeless. Their art style that they're using, and that's you can see that in the you know in the presentation art of both Dragonlance um, and Spelljammer, the new Spelljammer. It's like the art just looks boring. It looks muted. It looks, even though they have more than just your primary colors, um, even those are muted still. So it still has that kind of a washed out look to it. I'm not really a big fan of their art style at all because it has no oomph to it. It's just lifeless, soulless. And so here we get to where I really believe that Wizards of the Coast, whether inadvertently or intentionally, they're cultivating and encouraging a short-term campaign style, and they still claim, and other commentators will claim that 6 sessions is still the average. So they spoke about this almost a year ago, where they admitted that from their own internal polling or article that they put out there, that the average session is average game length is lasting about six sessions, and they don't see that as a problem. All right, and again, breaking away from the essence of true Dungeons and Dragons. That does not allow for anyone, the GM or the player, to actually master playing the game. Uh, you will never be able to fully develop a character. You will never be able to hit all of the three pillars of role playing. Whether it's combat, it's social interaction, and it's exploration. How much can you truly explore of the world in 6 sessions or less? You really can't. Um, Even if with their milestone experience, leveling up, which is another mistake, in my opinion. It's in 6 sessions. I mean, you're going to go up 12 levels in 6 sessions. You're going to go from first to 12th. Go from a starting character to a highly advanced character in just 6 sessions, and all of the opportunity in between to truly explore the world, it's going to be lost. So I think that the cultivation and encouragement of this short-term campaign style it's a detriment to maintaining the essence of Dungeons and Dragons. It's not a good business model, and it's not good for the hobby in the sense that you're generating a very non-in-depth playing model in getting into a role-playing game and really really investing into a role-playing game. So it's just I just don't understand it. It just doesn't make sense. Defies logic. They want to reflect the present day desires of the weird left. Yeah, but I mean, even I mean, yes, younger people tend to have shorter attention spans, but this is something that they're supposed to feel like they're they're trying to experience in a much deeper way. So how could they have such a shallow immersion into it? It's like it conflicts exactly with what they're what they're looking for, or at least claim that they're looking for. Maybe they don't know what they're looking for, and they're perfectly fine with playing a couple sessions and then they stop playing. If that's your business model, is to try to attract more people to play for just 6 sessions, they're dropping your game after 6 sessions. They're not picking up a new campaign. It obviously didn't have what it took to keep them invested in a longer campaign. As simplified as it is, it doesn't actually speak to an overcomplicated game for today's players. Again, it's most DMs that I've seen and experienced through 5e, they trim down some of those rules anyway. So they are giving it a more simplified approach to it. And I never hear of anyone talking about running 5e raw. All right, not like you hear like with AD&D First Edition, which is insane anyway. You really can't run that raw either. But I never hear anyone talking about, oh, we run 5e raw. So that's another thing that they might claim is, well, this is the best way to run it, but I've never encountered anybody that says that or does that. And I don't believe anybody actually believes that. So I think a lot of people simplify the game anyway. Expected leveling rate is 5th in 1 session from 1st to 2nd, then 2 to 3 sessions per level till 4th, then 3 sessions per level thereafter. This is a speed up to 9th or 10th level in 6 sessions. Or I know when I read Essentials, I was reading it, and if you did a couple of small quests, you went from 1st to 2nd, and then like 2 or 3 more, you did levels 3, 4, then one particular adventure was 5, and then the final one you left Essentials, and this was the Dragon Spire. You finish it up as a 6th-level character, and then looking at it, it looked like that would take about 6 sessions if you were going to do that, and so it was kind of like a rinse and repeat kind of mentality to it. You'd run your characters up to 6th level, and then you were done. And then you went and did something else, or you did another small, maybe you did the Mines of Phandalin, or however you pronounce the name, and that would run you through, a number of levels. So it's just these little, almost like sound bites of adventure, mini campaigns. Is all that they're looking for. It's very shallow. Hey, Shadow and Sun, how's it going? No, you didn't miss much. This is just a little impromptu live stream. I was having some trouble recording at home, and so I just wanted to get a video out there, and this topic came to my mind. I wanted to talk a little bit about Wizards of the Coast, which I tend not to do, and basically point out that the reason why I don't talk about Wizards of the Coast often on my channel is the fact that I've kind of left it behind. The only reason why I'm talking about this now is because they're talking about Dragonlance, and Dragonlance was a franchise when it came at the time. It came at a time when D&D was deeply embroiled in the Satanic Panic, and I really attribute Dragonlance to helping save Dungeons and Dragons from getting shut down, because it was the messaging of Dragonlance that kind of probably assuaged some of the people's, it was certainly a story of good versus evil that could not be argued. It had Christian undertones to it that that were by design, obviously, and so, but it's just kind of gone through, and to respond to a commenter on another channel who really doesn't understand Dragonlance at all, and was basically saying he didn't understand it, at least admitted that he didn't understand it. You won't understand Dragonlance if you didn't read the novels. And it was never the intention, I think, of TSR, even when they came up with the Dragonlance source book, that you wouldn't have already read the novels first in order to put that source book into context. And what AD&D did, what TSR did with Dragonlance, as far as the game was concerned, was they made very self-contained series of adventures, 12 modules that ran through the entire story of the first 6 or possibly even 9 novels of Dragonlance, and brought you through the whole thing. And it was you were playing those characters. It was really hard to make your own characters and bring them into that. It was really designed to run it through as a very railroaded storyline. So, like I said, a separate campaign from any other campaign you might have been running, almost like a long extent tournament play of doing Dragonlance, and that's what you were going to focus on. And it wasn't really designed for you to play in the world of Krynn without having read the novels first, and this new iteration of whatever it is, whether it's a war game, I've heard, various things. I don't think it's going to be a direct translation to 5e as far as a tabletop role-playing game. I think that they're going to look to merchandise some figures for it. They're going to have some kind of a board game almost kind of thing built around it. But if any modern player is going to look to play this iteration of Dragonlance and not read the original novels, they're really not understanding anything. And if Wizards of the Coast breaks dramatically from that, when they do read those novels, and they can see the brilliance that are in them, and then see how it's translated to this new Wizards of the Coast view of it, I think that they're going to be deeply disappointed. They can be like, wow, they really did drop the ball here. So, yeah, I think that's the only reason why I'm really bringing this up, is that I was such a big fan of Dragonlance, and particularly the first 6 novels, that that to see what they're potentially doing with it now is is something that it's like, I don't see how we as old school players who played back then and had an appreciation for what Dragonlance was is actually going to look at this as anything but a disrespectful slight at the franchise. Slower than you're saying, but still too fast. Let's see what I don't know what that was in relation to. Oh, okay. So, all right. So that was back to like thinking how fast the levels go up. All right. Let's see. The first few novels came before the novel. Wait, the first few modules came before the novels. Yeah, but they were written. The novels were written beforehand, so they were kind of. The novels obviously take longer than the modules did, so they might have came around the same time. I want to say it was anywhere between 83 and 85. I'm not sure when the modules came out as opposed to the novels, but the idea that the novels were written afterwards, I'm not sure. I mean, we're going back a long way, and I just don't remember which came first. I know I read the novels before I did the modules, so maybe that's just the context that I'm putting it in. It is commonly repeated fallacy that the early modules are based on novels. I don't know. I mean, I read the novels. I played the first one. The first. Actually, I think we eventually went through all 12. I didn't DM them, but yeah, I'm really under the impression. But again, we're going back to 40 years ago, so I'm not quite sure. Okay. Um, Everything was based on Hickman's own game. All right, which okay. And again, it's I don't know which came first. The chicken or the egg. Which came first. The idea for the novels or the adventure modules came first. I'm not sure. Um, so getting back to cultivating and encouraging short I think cultivating and encouraging a player base that rejects the foundations of the legacy of D&D, erroneously labeling the legacy products bigoted, racist, or sexist, or any of those other things, is another thing that Wizards of the Coast is really cultivating and encouraging. And when we see the speculation about the trailers that we saw for not so much for Spelljammer, but certainly for Dragonlance, the expectation is that they're going to subvert the message of what Dragonlance was in order to quote unquote modernize it, which I don't use that term as as a positive. A lot of times when people say, "Well, we're going to modernize something," or they imply that means improvement. Modernization doesn't always mean improvement. It typically does, but in these cases, it does not necessarily do that. And then on top of that, as Wizards of the Coast labels um, these legacy products, they still have no problem with selling them. All right, so here once again we have Wizards of the Coast tapping into uh, old school products, legacy products, and they'll put them out there. They'll say, well, you know we're um, we're reviving these to try to hook us grognards into purchasing these things. But at the same time, we know that they're holding their noses while they're selling this, because they have things such as the disclaimer on the old school stuff saying, well, these things were bad then, they're bad now, and but we're not going to erase them because there's money to be made, basically. I just have some students passing by, so I'm going to just wait for passing time. Um, let's get back to comments and see. Everything was based on his game. Yes. All right, and I mean, I will defer if you're more familiar with it than I, or just remember it better than I. Okay, so one of the things that came to my mind was that this legacy products reimagining. All right, and I know they use this term, occasionally when they're talking about. I believe it began with Ravenloft, and when they start reimagining, they're stripping out the original content or their essence of what made them really stand out, and they're really they're reducing the product to something very, very simple, not nuanced, as well as um, like stripping it of any of its risk or any of those other things. So it's just the expectation is that they're going to ruin it. I mean, it remains to be seen, but I don't have very much confidence that they won't. Yeah, and then that gets us welcome, Drac. Dragon Pool. That gets us back to the the attention span kind of thing, the instant gratification, very shallow experience that they look for as far as commitment to short campaigns as opposed to long campaigns, and and just with so many different options that they have, they're always looking to see, well, what's the next character that I can create before they even completed fully developing the current character that they're playing. Now, my belief is that the destruction of the legacy content is intentional, in my opinion, which is why I advocate for us old school DMs and players to embrace tradition and reject modernity. Now, if you remember um, when Tracy Hickman actually did two pictures, one was a Dragonlance, I believe Clyde Caldwell painting, and then the other was a modern, it might have even been Critical Role group of characters. And that's all he put on there was embrace tradition and reject modernity. And the Twitter trolls lost their freaking minds. They acted like it was an attack on diversity. It was an attack on, it was trying to say, oh well, all those Dragonlance characters were white and they were all, predominantly male and, predominantly human. Forgetting the fact that there was a half elf, a dwarf, a Kender, and other mixes. They just saw what they wanted to see and they read into it what they wanted to read into it, and they used it as a means to attack the former creators, and that gets us back to reinforcing and cultivating, the fact that WOTC encourages this mislabeling of the legacy products and its creators and its artists and such, to say, they were wrong then, they're wrong now, and we're moving in a new direction. We're reimagining. Unfortunately, they never reimagine or just create their own content. They keep on going back to this well that they continuously try to poison along the way. Um, and I don't see their rationale behind doing that. It might be just a sense of, well, we know we can't produce at that level of creativity, and generate a following like that has with our own products. So what we're going to do is we're going to diminish the older products and thereby, in fact, raise our mediocrity to that kind of a level where it's like, well, this is what D&D is producing, and it's like you either accept this or you accept playing the bigoted, racist, misogynists, old ways, of the past. So it's like you get them to want to reject the past, even though the quality was higher, in order to accept your mediocre pablum that you're throwing out there, for people to just buy up because it's new, shiny, as opposed to old and and tried and true. Embracing tradition is my bread and butter. I still play first edition and hate planned obsolescence, which is the current business model of all the big companies. Yeah, I mean it's there's some of the and you see that across many industries. I mean, computers are designed now to last about 5 years, and then they're completely obsolete. Try to keep your cell phone for too damn long, and you start seeing, oh, my battery life will only last like 20 minutes, and and they stopped updating. So there's And that's the same, I guess, in the industry here. Now, I do see some people arguing or saying that they're not. They're still using a terrible business model where nobody buys the books, or except for maybe the dungeon master, and the rest of the players can actually survive without the books, and they're just playing their characters, and that's it. I don't know what the workaround for that is, um, other than it doesn't say that everyone can't. If you separated the books and being source books are source books and adventure books are adventure books, and then everything else is a player DM resource, then you'd have more people buying additional books. The DMs would just buy the DM's guide and the adventure books. Um, maybe the monster manual, or players would have that plus possibly a source book, that the player's handbook plus a source book for their individual classes or whatever. I mean, you might get to the splat book issue that you had with second edition, but I think combining them all up into one volume is kind of a mistake as well. If you want to keep that separation between, well, the DM is going to use this book and the monster manual, and the players only have access to the player's handbook. Yeah, the new writers just take old concepts and remove any nuance from them. Yeah, they give you a very simplistic, almost a child's view look at certain things. And then that's the other thing between more modern and the old school players. And I know that Gary Gygax believed this as well, and Mike Merles even might have said it as well. We were much more well read, and gets back to my talk about Dragonlance. Um, I don't think anyone in TSR expected that we would be playing those Dragonlance modules or buying the source book without having read the novels themselves. If you're going to try to get into this new Dragonlance that Wizards of the Coast is putting out and not read the original novels, you're not going to understand what Dragonlance was all about. If you're just going to take what Wizards of the Coast tells you, Dragonlance, that's not real Dragonlance. It has Dragonlance name on it, just like D&D. 5e has the D&D logo on it. It's not really Dungeons and Dragons. It's something else. And I kind of tie in here. 5e as a game system is outshined by many of the OSR games that are out there. It is a mere shadow of what Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was 40 years ago. I really don't see any real innovation in what 5e offers. I don't see better gameplay. I don't see a greater focus on the three pillars of role playing. So I don't see better combat. I don't see better exploration. I don't see better social interaction. I see just the addition of game mechanics to do the things that we used to role play our way through. I see character sheets that kind of take you every step of the way through. And so you're playing off the character sheet, like reading off the character sheet, rather than thinking about what your character can do that's not on the character sheet. And so the old school created better DMs and better players, as far as being able to do more with actual less layers of complexity. Stealing is more like it is taking and bastardizing everything that was good and wonderful about Dungeons and Dragons and turning it into absolute garbage, made for the lowest common denominator. Yes. No problem, Cal. So And I think we're coming close to 50 minutes on here. So, yeah, so I think that what might have been in the core of 5e, was certainly an improvement from fourth edition, and I see 5e as being more of an extension and improvement of fourth edition. Now, I recently read someone's comment on Facebook, leading up to this live stream that 5e really borrows a lot from 3, 3 and 3.5, and even BX and such. I don't see that connection at all. I mean, I think the only thing they really carried through was the 6 attribute scores. Everything else is dramatically different. But once you get to Tasha's and forward, it's no longer the same game. They so dramatically change and strip away those essential components of what was Dungeons and Dragons. That it's no longer Dungeons and Dragons. It's a pale copy of what Dungeons and Dragons is supposed to be. It's a copy game. I mean, I'll use other commenters, thing like he attacks the OSR by saying, "Oh, they're just mere copies." I don't see that 5e is any different than any other OSR game. I mean, even less so. It has less connection to old school D&D because all it has is the 6 attributes that I can tell. With so many different character classes, you can't even say that a fighter in 5e is anywhere near the same kind of character class as a fighter in AD&D Second Edition, which actually added a little bit more nuance to it than First Edition. So I think that even the slimmest of tethers that they still have to old school D&D are enough to not consider it, the equivalent of any other, OSR third-party retro clone. And I think it's even less retro than most other OSR retro clones are. I think it borrows less from the old school and possibly more so just an extension of fourth edition. And I don't know how much it really does borrow from third edition, but I don't believe very much. It takes virtually nothing from second edition or AD&D first edition, other than, again, attribute scores. So this game, hey Takato. All right, so this game is being geared more and more towards everyone who gets a trophy generation. WOTC cares nothing for the gamers that came before them. No, absolutely not. And they're even starting to. I mean, I don't think that they'll talk about those that worked on Wizards of the Coast third edition. They'll eventually, move them off. Remember, they said there was no canon pre-2014. So they're looking at it very much as it's a fifth edition and forward. And I think that they're, the fact that they've rejected Mike Merle's as much as they have, they're really looking at Tasha's and forward more so than even the fifth edition. Remember, they just recently put out that that huge addendum to the core rule book, and basically that's the version that you get when you buy the PDF of it. So you can't even, if you have hardcovers, those hardcovers matching up to the PDFs now are dramatically different. So they've kind of left their first printing of fifth edition, in the dust, in their rear view mirrors. Took a pic of 13 baby rats, so appropriated the new D&D. Yeah, it's all about money. It's all about, and I was seeing some arguments where it's like it's not about gameplay anymore. They're not even worried about the gameplay. It's all about the message. We want to make sure that the right messaging, the right social messaging gets put out there. So they're not so much, and it shows that they don't care about the gameplay, because they're really not, they're really not looking at it and saying, well, how do we make the gameplay more, more dynamic for who's already here? It's always like, how do we expand it to bring more people in, even for a short term, and then churn? It's like they're looking to generate churn rather than long-standing fans. Yes, I mean, skill proficiencies and such. I mean, they're in a lot of games. There's nothing unique about 30 feats are a great addition to the game in principle, but the feats also lead to a lot of broken builds. The feats lead to min-maxing. The feats lead to you playing off of your character sheet rather than you playing your character beyond the sheet, and so I think that the feats are a danger mitigation tool to make the game just that much easier. Because if your first action doesn't work, then you're going to do your second wind action, or if that doesn't work, then you'll rely on your feats, or whatever. It's like try after try after try in order to achieve a success. Is just, it's not a good gameplay model. And welcome, Mike. Piedar, welcome. I prefer the old school game myself. I do enjoy a few 5e games I'm involved with, but you had an entirely different game, really, yes. And I guarantee you, none of your, or I'm going to guess, I won't guarantee it. Does your GM for the 5e games run 5e raw, rules as written? 4E has at least one good idea: minions. I never played 4E, so I really don't know. I know minions in Conan 2D20 and how those work, and they basically work as fodder to help create that cinematic feel of you ripping through dozens of these minor critters to crush through and feel like really cinematically heroic and that kind of thing. I prefer the old school as well, but with a few new ideas. I mean, there's some cool dice mechanics that some of the modern games have. I like Momentum and Doom and in Conan 2D20. I like the fact that a lot of the old school games didn't have. I mean, certainly not AD&D or Dungeons and Dragons in general didn't have very good critical tables. It didn't have spell misfires like you have in Dungeon Crawl Classics. So there are new mechanics out there that are actually very, very, cool, unique, innovative that that could and should make their way into other modern games. And I have a feeling that since they're coming from other games that already do them, you won't see them in a Dungeons and Dragons 6th edition if there is ever one. They might just decide we're not going to keep on calling it editions. We're going to just keep on updating the current PDFs of the of 5th edition and leave it at that, or just call it Dungeons and Dragons and then slap a year on it instead. So let's see. I just find 5e lacks altitude. Also, everyone being so powerful spell casters from the start And these weird combo of races walking into a tavern without an eyebrow raised. Yeah, it's just, it's like everything can't be the cantina in Tatooine, or wherever the story. Everything can't be the Star Wars cantina. Um, there's the worlds are supposed to be somewhat, where demi-humans and humanoids are less common than humans. It's just human-centric worlds is what makes those other fantastic species and races fantastic. The fact that you're in a world setting where elves might only be 5% of the population, and what they're seeing there should reflect that. So it's again, and getting back to like Spelljammer. All right, so that's going to give them the mobility to go to different places. I understand that, and I have less concerns about Spelljammer because I really do see it as just a mode of transportation to go from one realm to another. So that's just you know I don't see it as much of a setting as I do just a conveyance, getting from one place to another. Um, Dragonlance has a very specific lore, and if they break away from those original novels and that very specific lore, I think that it's not going to sell well. And it hasn't even come close to being released yet, and it's already getting pushed back on the fact that they didn't even think to speak to and again, not ask permission of the original writers, but at least consult with them, at least be able to say, oh yeah, we spoke to Jeffrey Grubb, or we spoke to Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman before we really got into this thing. That's all it would have taken. Just a small indication of respect would have been nice. Yeah, like I said, I don't usually do these live shows, and certainly not at this time at work. But the fact that I'm having some technical difficulty. I have a video in the queue that's been downloaded for like 13 hours. So I got to see, or I should say, uploading for like 13 hours. So I got to see what the hell's going on with my internet connection at home. But that's going to be my kind of breakdown on the Bro SR. So I'm hoping that you'll all enjoy that video as well once I figure out what the heck is going on with getting that posted. So I wanted to get out there, today and get something up in case I don't get a chance to do that later on. So I've been disenchanted with 5e and WOTC's direction for the game for a while. I just started looking at Castles and Crusades. I like what I see. Yeah, and I believe I have like a 2004 and a 2016 version of Castles and Crusades. And I'll take a look through those and everything. I have other games now. Castles and Crusades is supposed to be the true successor for Gary Gygax of Dungeons and Dragons after he left TSR. Now, of course, he did Cyborg Commando after he left TSR. That was his first game. Then he did Legendary Journeys and and Dangerous Adventures. Or that I always flip those two, which are very different game systems than Dungeons and Dragons. And I'll spend a little bit more time with those as well. But he did at least consult with Castles and Crusades, and I believe that that he had mentioned that Castles and Crusades was kind of what he saw as a natural progression from AD&D Second Edition, I guess, going into that. I don't think he was a big fan of AD&D Second Edition either. Yes, I believe in starting characters out to be, in some cases, even zero level. I like the idea of the ordinary character attempting to do extraordinary things. Yeah, I've always found, Piotr, that when I introduce people who've only played 5e to some of the older systems, that once they get past like the real simplicity of it, I've had only two out of maybe 30 that said, you know what, I just prefer to play 5e, and they went back to 5e. Most have said, hey, you know what, I'm going to look around and spend more time with other OSR titles, older editions or OSR titles that are out there. I've had very, very few people reject OSR in favor of 5e. Yes. Yeah, they do actually. They come straight out in Castles and Crusades, and they truly honor Gary Gygax and those, unlike Wizards of the Coast. Hello, Facebook user. I really like zero level characters as well. Yeah, I like starting them off slow, starting them off in a small village, and having them do fairly mundane things in the very beginning, and then kind of branching out from there. So having like truly humble beginnings. I heard those same things about Gygax and CNC. He also wrote for them for Troll Lords, lost the rights to the products after he died. Yeah. Oh, hey, John Scott. So yeah, so there's so that's kind of my little rant. Um, it's kind of my little rant on the direction of Wizards of the Coast, mostly as it relates to um, Dragonlance, D&D in general. And so to look at my first question, my starting question, how far removed from the legacy and essence of D&D can WOTC take 5e before we should start paying it no mind? I pretty much stopped after Tasha's, and I really can't see myself going back. Um, I certainly would not buy a sixth edition. Even the completionist in me, wanting to have the core books of every single edition. And I really do go all the way back to white box, every single edition. And the idea of giving WotC that money for sixth edition just to have it sit on a shelf is just not something that I can see myself doing unless they had a dramatic change over the next 2 years, and who's actually running it, who's writing it, who's um, and then how they present the products. I would have to see a real turning back on away from just the amount of layers and glut and wokeness and all that stuff that is in the current edition, um, and get back to its true essence of Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, I'm actually leaving work in about 10 minutes, so I am going to take a look at a couple more comments, and then we're going to make this a wrap. So, glad to hear about your 5e players, because I am fearful that they simply won't like underpowered, mundane squishiness of the characters. If they're in a large enough group, they will realize that they're squishy when they make stupid mistakes, and those stupid mistakes will decline over time. If they rely on each other, So have a much better coordination and group dynamic going on. They'll see that they actually enhance each other's ability to survive through those things. If their characters are very selfless, looking out after each other, and they're role playing it through, that will get them over the apparent squishiness. Even when their characters fail, if you make or even if a character dies, you make that meaningful, and you make it something that is remembered in the future, so that when they do re-roll a new character and they're playing through, and then they hear some errant comment about their former character, this might be weeks or months later, and then they're like, oh, wait a second, I recognize that name. That person traveled with this group before I came here. Let's see what they're talking about, and maybe that leads to another, and it helps kind of keep the memory of that character alive. So it's, again, you're not going to get that from a 6-session 5e campaign. That's the kind of thing that happens after you've gone through 40, 60, 100 sessions of any other true campaign, that you're going to get that kind of a world-setting timeline continuity thing going on. That's true Dungeons and Dragons. It's truly running a campaign that is a long-lasting and viable long-lasting campaign, is by adding that layer of nuance and player engagement in your campaign. After a couple of years, you'll probably kick up the copies for the next couple, just let them collect dust on the shelf. Yeah. And welcome, Daniel. Yeah, I don't see doing it. I don't see 60 being something I put money to. There is an OSR game. So the Greyhawk Grognard puts out a game which he kind of calls the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition. He's pieced a lot of the game mechanics based on what Gary Gygax has written in various articles and such. So the game is, I haven't done the reviews yet of it. I'm actually waiting to buy the monster manual for it, so I have the core 3 books, and then I'll do a review of it. But if you just look up Greyhawk Grognard and see the game, it's just drawing a blank on me, and I'm at work, so I can't really look it up. But he believes that's the natural successor of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, based largely on Gary Gygax's articles that he had written. Adventures Dark and Deep, thank you. Yes, Adventures Dark and Deep. There's a bundle for $99. Yeah, so that's all 3 books. Yeah, so that's not too bad of a price. I already have the first 2. I got to get the 3rd one. But yes, Adventures Dark and Deep. So yeah, take a look at that if you're if you want to check something out. Eventually, I'll get around to doing the review of it. Like I said, I want to get the monster manual, so I have all 3 core books, and then I'll take care of that. But yeah, that's something I will work on. All right, everyone. I am going to wrap this up because we are getting close to. I leave work in 10 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this up. We're about an hour and 15 minutes in. I want to thank everybody for popping in, and this will upload, and you'll be able to leave comments on the video once it's done uploading. Hopefully, this uploads a lot faster than the going live, rather than just the other recording I was trying to upload. But anyway, you all have a great day. I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon, and running my first edition game tonight. So we'll see what comes on. I have to do a wrap-up video for Season 2 of that. We're starting Season 3. The characters are now going into the 5 to 7 level band, and so their adventures are going to start picking up. So once again, thanks for joining. Have a great day, and keep on gaming out there.